All right, we're going to move on to behavior intervention plans or behavior support plans. And those two words, intervention support, in this case, are going to be interchangeable. You might see the acronyms BIP or BSP come up. I will generally just call them behavior plans, but know that we are talking about the same thing. So before we get into behavior intervention plans, let's connect the dots to what we just learned in a previous lesson. First, being that a behavior intervention plan is only going to be as good as the information behind it. And that information is going to come from a functional behavioral assessment, meaning you can't make a real plan to support behavior if you don't know why that behavior is happening in the first place. So, any formal level of behavior plans must be based on a functional behavior assessment. By formal, what I mean here is completed documentation of those tier 1 and tier 2 supports not working for a student. And formally meaning we have to really get into the why of things aren't working in order to make a plan to fix it or to support that student better. And that's what formal in this case would refer to. Not all behavior plans need to be formal. You, as teachers, are kind of doing mini behavior plans all the times with your students, using that internalized data that you have, whether or not something's working, your observations, your own personal checklists and notes. And you do this all the time. It doesn't always have to be a very formal process, but for the sake of our course, we're going to look at it on the formal side of things. So here is a resource that I have for you all showing kind of just the difference in what a functional behavior assessment is and what a behavior intervention plan is. And they also show you kind of how these two things connect. I won't go over it, but just know that this example or this resource and so many others are in your weekly examples and materials in the Canvas modules. Now, what does a behavior intervention plan, behavior support plan do? First, as an official definition, the behavior plan can be used as a proactive action plan to address behaviors that impede the learning of that student or of others. Essentially, what this is a game plan, a blueprint, your lesson plan, if you will, to how you're going to support behavior. It's very specific because it's going to be for one student, but it's still your plan for this. Now, if we're writing a behavior plan, it's going to be assumed that lesser interventions at that tier 1 and tier 2 level have not been successful. We shouldn't be getting to the point of writing a behavior plan for anybody if we have not really tried any of those tier 1s or tier 2. We need kind of definitive proof that those are not working. And how do we get definitive proof? Your data. Your behavior plan is going to take everything that you uncovered in that FBA process, and that's all that rich data about what's happening, when does it happen, why does it happen, and it's going to turn it into action. It helps answer the question, now that we understand behavior, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to use this information to help that student succeed? It's that so what, like, okay, we know the student is trying to escape from something. So what? The so what is our behavior plan now. So here's what we're going to do. The behavior plan is not just about getting a student to change behavior. A strong behavior plan is actually about teaching. It's about building new skills and creating structure and making sure that the student has the tools and support they need to meet expectations in a better way. In practice, a behavior plan is a written plan that clearly outlines the target behavior we want to address, the function behind that behavior, the strategies we're going to use to reduce the behavior, the replacement teaching skills that we're going to do, and the supports that all adults will provide to make it all happen. And this plan is supposed to be proactive, not punitive. That's very important. When it's done well, a behavior plan is, again, our roadmap, our game plan, our GPS system, our lesson plan, and this, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be the thing that helps this whole team show up for that student with consistency, with clarity, with care. We all know what to do because this plan is going to be that clear. So let's talk about what it actually takes to build a successful behavior plan. First, we have to know, and this is going to be important for anything related to special education, it is not one and done. Nothing in special education is a one and done situation. That's a lesson to learn, I guess. Like most things in special education, writing a behavior plan, it's a process, and it's a process with multiple phases. And skipping through any of those phases, it's probably going to be the reason the plan doesn't work the way we want it to work. So this flow chart here, I had to break it up into two pieces just so I can make it fit on the slide. But again, it's in your weekly resources. This flowchart is from an amazing resource. It's called the BSP Desk Reference, and we're going to be using a lot from this resource as we go through the lesson. But BSP here stands for Behavior Support Plan. Again, same thing as Behavior Intervention Plan. Let's go through the phases here. So the first phase is addressing the problem. This is where we start, right? When something isn't working in the classroom. This is where the teacher and the staff members are going to start reaching out to the student and saying, hey, what do you need? And they're also going to be reaching out to the student's family to try to build a relationship so that they can share progress, but also concerns, and also get some ideas from parents or family members who might have a different experience or perspective to share on those behaviors, right? At that exact same time, the teachers are implementing some of those classroom interventions. They're tier ones and your tier twos. And we're not just implementing, we are collecting data and seeing how well they're being implemented and received. If the behavior doesn't improve with these initial supports, that's when we start to loop in other professionals. That's where we start to get in other people who are involved with the student, because the behavior is prolonging and it's really it's continuing to interfere with that student's learning or with the learning of other students as well. Then we going into understanding the problem behavior. And this is like, once we flagged the behavior that we need to support, the next step is understanding. And that's that whole FBA process. That's collecting our data. That's the checklist. That's the ABC chart. That's the observations. All of that stuff is put into place to help us start identifying those patterns and possible functions of behavior. After that whole process, we get into actually developing that support plan. And in here, this is where the behavior support plan team meets, right? This is going to include specialists and teachers and administrators and the family, whoever is really involved with this student and can support their behavior. We're pulling them in. They're now part of the behavior support plan team. However, whatever name we want to give them. And all together, this group is going to analyze a lot of different things. First, they're going to be looking at what environmental factors might be contributing to the behavior. What's the function of the behavior? They're going to take all that data and analyze it together, and they're going to figure out, why is the student doing this? If that student has an IEP, this conversation will generally be a part of the IEP meeting, but it can happen separately as well. From this point of analyzing data and getting the why and figuring out different environmental things, that's where we start to write the behavior support plan, the behavior intervention plan. And that's going to include clear goals, and every single person is going to get assigned responsibilities, and there will be a communication system in place so that the team, everyone can stay on the same page. Everyone does their part and can communicate whether or not something is working and what to do next. That's really incredibly important in this process. Then we go into implementing the behavior support plan. It's not just enough to have a great plan and print it out and everybody signs their name to it and says, all right, see you next year. See you next time we have to talk about this. No, now we have to implement that plan. We have to put the plan into action. And this might mean a lot of different things. It might mean changing parts of the environment, changing the curriculum to support replacement behaviors. And the replacement behaviors are what we want the student to do instead of whatever it is that they were doing. And this implementing phase, we're teaching those new behaviors very explicitly, and we are reinforcing them constantly. We are also outlining any reactive strategies, and those are what to do in the moment if that challenging behavior happens again. So how do we react to it? And on top of this, we are going to monitor that progress regularly. We're going to see how it's working. If it's working, we're going to monitor that progress because that's going to lead us into our final phase here, monitoring and evaluating the plan. So tracking how it's going. Team members are going to review the student's progress, adjust as needed, and come back together to discuss the next steps. If the plan isn't working, it doesn't mean it's a failure. It's a sign that we need to revise, we need to reteach, we need to rebuild parts of that plan. Again, not a failure. We've just learned what didn't work. Now we have to keep moving towards what works. So let's break it down. Who's actually responsible for creating and implementing the behavior plan? Generally, the members of the behavior support team are going to be interchangeable, and it's going to depend on the specific needs of that student, right? And who has experience with them, access to them, who sees them in these different situations. In your formal situations, behavior plans are typically going to be created by like the school psychologist, a behavior specialist, the student's case manager. They'll take the lead in writing the plan, and they're going to pull together the FBA data, and they're going to lead that whole team through analyzing the data and talking things through and brainstorming ideas. And they'll be the ones to like write and draft that plan. but it does not mean that they are the sole voice of the plan. That's what the team is for, right? In the event, and this is going to happen for many of you, that you are the case manager and the teacher, that means that you are likely going to be the one writing the plan, because it also goes along with this IEP system quite a bit. Again, not alone. You're not supposed to be doing it alone, but you might be the one taking the lead here. Behavior plans are going to be implemented by everyone who has a say or a stake or a responsibility towards this student. That is the teachers, that's the paras, that's support staff. Anybody school-based is generally your boots on the ground, right? They're the ones who put the strategies into action every day. They are collecting ongoing data on how things are going, and they're going to importantly offer critical input during the development of the plan and then in reviewing and adjusting the plan. Again, they need to also feel like they can say something in order for you to hear it and put it in there the right way. So even if you are the case manager or the person in charge of leading the development, again, you're not supposed to be writing in isolation. Don't do that. You have to include data from all the sources, including the student's family when appropriate, and sometimes the student themselves. It depends on the behavior. Everybody's voice matters if we're really trying to make a difference in behavior here. We can't ignore the perspective or voice of someone who's experienced the behavior differently or intensely or more or less. We need to include them. And if you are not the person in charge of writing the behavior plan, your job as an educator to this child, as someone who spends time with them, as someone who's trying to help them succeed, your job is to contribute to the process. Your observations are going to fuel the plan, and your consistency in making all the interventions happen and putting them in place, that's what's going to help the plan succeed. Your collaboration, especially with families, is going to make sure that the students' support plan isn't a secret to anyone, right? Everyone is a part of this process. You are 100% essential. Okay, to see all the elements that go into a behavior plan, we are going to use the behavior support plan template. And this is coming from that BSP desk reference that I mentioned earlier. We're going to use a lot of their materials, so I'll show you those in just a bit. That entire resource is quite large, so I broke it down into different parts that we'll use in this class, but you can find the whole thing in its separate parts on our weekly materials list. Now, here on this slide, what I have is just kind of a reference, but we're going to get into all of these. And so know that you can come back to look at this if needed. All right, so we are going to use the BSP guide that I have up here. It's a pretty lengthy one, but we'll go through it together to break down all the pieces of the behavior support plan. And they correspond with these matching numbers. So there are 14 lines, and there's, I'll just go through really quickly. There's 14, and they will correspond to the guide. So we're going to start with lines 1, 2, and 3, according to the guide, and that's defining the behavior problems. Oh, excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4. Up front in every section is a kind of description of the big idea. But as you go through, just scroll down a little bit. Each line is broken down into what you need to know about it, essentially. Some of the areas are far more lengthy, and some of them are a little short, depending on what it is you're filling out. Okay, line number 1. The prompt here is to describe the behavior impeding learning. Easy. That's an operational definition. Easy in terms of understanding. Again, we don't have to be experts in writing them, operational definitions and writing everything. We gain expertise through experience. So even if you're not an expert today, know that it's okay. We can keep working on those skills. Eventually, you'll be really great at writing definitions and goals and whatever it is you need to write. The important part is that you understand what you're supposed to be doing here, and that's how we build up those skills. So first parts first, describe the behavior is essentially what's happening. Describe the behavior that's getting in the way of learning. Learning being the important thing, right? We know that we can't just say off task or that student is disrupting other people's learning. We know that we have to give a description, a definition that is observable, measurable, that is not judgmental, that is coming from an objective point of view and explicitly breaking down what the behavior is. So with each section, I think this is really important because we're also going to be using this in our assignment, is components or is a scoring guide. It's a rubric to help us determine whether or not the information that is in these behavior plans is good. And if we're the ones writing it, we can follow the rubric to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements to the first line here. And they're going to do this for every single line that comes up. They give examples of what a high score of a 2, a score of a 1, a score of a 0 is, as well as breaking down some more key concept things. All right, line number 2 in this template that we're going to be using is the behavior impedes learning, because that's just finishing the rest of the sentence. What is the impact of the student's learning? Are there less academic and social skills because of that student's behavior? Is the behavior interfering with other students' opportunities to learn? Is the behavior interfering with learning because it requires full adult attention 24/7? Like, we cannot be anywhere 10 feet away from the student. They need us at less than a foot away to help manage their behavior all day. That's incredibly important. Why is it impeding the learning? This is a big part in special education. We have to justify a lot of what we do. Why? Answer the why to what we like. Why are we putting this in place? Why are we doing this? Why are we suggesting that? Actually tends to be pretty important as a skill in special education. So not surprised that it's here as well. But line number 3, the need for this behavior support plan. Is it an early thing that we're catching? Is it a moderate need? Is it serious? Is it extreme? How do you know the difference? The guide tells us. The guide tells us how to determine if the behavior that we're trying to support is early stages, if it's moderate, if it's serious or extreme. It gives us lots of information here to really know what to do and what to choose. So line number 4, what is the frequency or intensity or duration of this behavior? That is our data. That is just a copy and paste of our data that we've collected. It can include general teacher impressions on the frequency, intensity, duration. It can, however, it should be more specific than just in general impressions, right? We need some hard facts here as data. But it could also include information about observation. It should include objective data sheets where we're taking the notes, the tallies. This is just our data. And we are going to talk about how frequently it happens. We're going to talk about how intense it happens when it does happen. Is it a huge behavior? Is it like, how strong is this behavior essentially? And importantly, we're going to talk about how long this behavior lasts, right? Those are all incredibly important to us. There's not a rubric for this question here, but this is more of just putting in your data, making sure it's in here. Okay, we're going to go to section, what is called here part prevention, part 1, and it's looking at lines 5, 6, and 7. Okay, line 5, what are the predictors of the behavior? Which situations is the behavior likely to occur? Is it a people-based thing? Like whenever this other person's around, the behavior occurs. Is it a time-based thing? It happens every day after lunch. Is it a place-based behavior? It happens very specifically during specials class, with music. Is it an object-related behavior? They're trying to get to something or avoid something. Those are the situations that we know that the behavior is more likely to occur in. We know that because we gather data on that. At this point, we are just still answering all the information that we have related to that student's background on the behavior, that data, that gathering session we've done, right? And they have also included a couple of environmental settings to look at and analyze to see if any of these could be potentially kind of triggering for the student for that behavior. Some of them may be very obvious to us, like, well, it happens every time when math comes up. Others will be less obvious, and it's generally really useful to have a list like this to help you make sure you kind of considered all your bases for environment for situations. Line number 6 is what supports the student using the problem behavior. So what keeps that problem behavior going? We are not talking about what we're going to do to it yet. We're not at that point. At this point, what we're essentially doing is summarizing our ABC data, our analysis. What happens before? We know what the behavior is. What happens after? This is going to help us think about the environment in terms of what has not yet been provided in that environment that could change that behavior, or what has not yet been removed from the environment that could change the behavior. We are not touching it yet. We are still just talking about it. This is important because that's going to help us identify if something is missing from the environment that we have to put in, or if we need to take something away from the environment that is triggering this behavior to continue happening. That's line number 6. And then line number 7, I just like to also look at their actual wording. What environmental changes, structure, and supports are needed to remove the students' need to use this behavior? So what do we got to do to have the students stop feeling like they need to use this behavior, keep going in this behavior? is it something that we need to make related to time changes, to changes in their space or in their materials or in the type of interactions that they're receiving? There are, of course, examples here, but these are all really helpful in terms of if we figured out what is keeping that behavior going, then the environmental changes and structures should be that's what we need to take away then. It's kind of an easy conclusional jump there. It's like, well, if we figured out that environment, the desk that the student's sitting at is an issue, then we need to, at line number 7, take away that test, give them something different, or think about what that solution might be. Of course, there is a rubric for line 5 with lots of examples for both. There is one for line 6, and it discusses how it connects to line 5. And there's one for line 7, which discusses how it connects to line 6. I point out the rubrics, and I'm going to keep pointing them out because they are incredibly helpful to you who have not maybe written one before, or if you have written one, maybe they could be written better. Or if you're looking at a plan, what things could be implemented or could be discussed or considered that weren't done the first time or weren't done initially in your first kind of like thinking about things that might actually be really helpful information for us to include and to consider. All right, we're going on to lines number 8 and 9. And lines number 8, the team believes the behavior occurred because this is the function of the behavior. The wording, the verbiage, I guess, that they use here is getting something, protesting something, avoiding something. Don't worry about using their specific language, but it's referring to the same functions of behavior that we know, that the student is trying to gain access to something, that is their getting example, that the student is trying to escape a situation that's still escape, that the student is trying to get attention from something, that's part of their getting here, and that the student is perhaps having a sensory need. The sensory isn't quite covered here, but know that when we talk about functions of behavior, we could be talking about any of those. Line number 9, what the team believes the student should do instead of the problem behavior. At this point, hopefully for many of you, it feels like a discussion, right? We pinpointed the behavior. We all agree that's the behavior. We looked at the environment. We talked about what's missing in it, what's not missing in it. Now why is that behavior happening? The specific nitty gritty. This behavior is happening because the function of this behavior is. Great. The next logical step in that conversation, what do we want the student to do instead? We know what the behavior is. We know what the reason for the behavior is. What do we want them to do instead? That's line number 9. And the way that it is written in this plan or in this guide is a functionally equivalent replacement behavior, a FERB. Functionally equivalent replacement behavior. It's a long way to say a replacement behavior, right? So what do we want the student to do instead? The instead is a replacement, right? We don't want them to do this. Instead, we want them to do this. That is a replacement behavior, the big this. So some examples here being the initial behavior is a student is swearing at their teacher. The reason for that behavior is because they have a lack of attention. They want more attention. The replacement behavior, the FERB, how it's called here, is that we want the student to verbally say, hey, I want your attention in a way that is not swearing at me, right? There are different examples here, but they're all kind of getting at the same thing. What is the behavior? Why is it happening? What do we want to happen? Pretty simple part of the conversation. I say that as a pretty simple part of the conversation. Leading this process with people, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes people do not know what to answer or what to say in terms of all of the questions that are in this. It may seem simple the way that I'm kind of putting it out here, but it's because we haven't gotten into it. We don't have a student to analyze just yet. And if you're the one leading this meeting or leading this process with people, this might be a very helpful worksheet here. It's the analyzing behavior worksheet. These are literally just a ton of questions about the who, what, when, where, why of the behavior. Asking these questions could really help everyone understand what the behavior is, why it's happening, what we do about it, what do we want to happen. Very helpful if you are not certain in leading the behavior, having the discussion, and maybe just want to make sure everybody can have a chance to contribute and understand how this behavior is coming to be. There's 2 copies of this in here, not certain why. There is also another resource thinking about the why of the behavior. It's looking more at the function. Great resource to use and share along with hypothesizing the why of the behavior. Just another worksheet to help you and your team go through that process. I like this checklist here. It's pretty simple, but also helpful. We figured out that instead of swearing at me, we want the student to try and get my attention verbally, right? But that does not include swearing. So we'll write that in this big box here, get attention verbally. And then to see if this is actually a replacement behavior that's going to work, generally going to work, very simple checklist. Will that replacement behavior result in the same kind of outcome as the target behavior, meaning the student's going to get attention? Yes, great. That's so far so good. Is this something the student can do? Yes. Can they be taught to do it? Yes. Will it work in your classroom? Yes. Is this something that can be easily acknowledged in terms of you giving reinforcement for it? Yes. Then that actually is a pretty good replacement behavior. If at any point we're answering no, we have to either think about how to incorporate this area into our replacement behavior, tweak the behavior, change the replacement behavior to the point where our student can actually use, or that, I'm sorry, to the point where that behavior, that replacement behavior is actually going to be a better substitute than the original behavior. It's actually going to do something for that student and work. And of course, there is a rubric to help you, and the rubrics are lengthy. We're going to go into the next section, which is lines 10 and 11. Line 10, what teaching strategies, necessary curriculum, and materials are needed to teach that behavior? That's a pretty simple question, right? We don't just say the student is going to stop swearing at me. That's the behavior I want. Great, that's the behavior we want. Just because we said it does not mean it happens so easily, right? We need to then teach them the appropriate way to talk, to share, to respond that is not swearing at you. What this does here is give just a lot of information, but what I like is the second page of this section. It gives you 4 basic steps to follow when teaching any new behavior. Easy peasy, 4 steps. We know the 4 steps take longer, but it is modeling, role playing, performance feedback, and then generalization maintenance, which is keeping it going. And this is just a really good kind of thinker of how to get through the behaviors or how to think about a replacement behavior. Now here is a strategies list. This is a blank version of the form that you can use with your team as well. And down below that is a completed form that kind of already has some suggested areas. So in this example, a student who becomes easily distracted, excuse me, might benefit from schedules and rules and procedures and active group participation and so forth. And so they've kind of already started some of this process for you to help you all think through, but pretty good one to do on your own with your team and see if any of these areas would help your student. All right, line number 11. What are reinforcement procedures to use for establishing, maintaining, and generalizing the replacement behaviors? This is reinforcement. We're just asking what reinforcements are we going to use? How are we going to reinforce the behavior that we want? And reinforcement, again, is increasing that behavior in happening, increasing the likeliness that the behavior is going to happen. We want to reinforce the student using the behavior so then it becomes a part of how they continue to seek whatever it is that they needed out of that behavior. That's maintaining it. And then generalizing it is maybe using it in different settings, using the behavior in different settings and not just in that one specific area, if appropriate. So some reinforcement examples would be here is like physical reinforcements, verbal, tangibles, tokens, some extra privileges. There's lots in here to look through. And we, of course, had that whole section on reinforcement. And this goes along with your rubric. And we're getting closer to the end here. We're going to look at reactive strategies. It's a little bit of a lengthy section here because it includes 4 different parts. And so reactive strategies, what strategies are going to be employed if the behavior happens again? And reactive strategies actually refers more to you and the rest of that team. How are you all going to react when or if that behavior keeps coming up? Despite your plan, despite everything you've already worked on and maybe have already tried putting into place, what do you do? What do all adults in this plan know what to do if the behavior happens again? Do we know how to prevent that behavior from getting worse, from escalating? Do we know if there are items or words or situations that are going to calm the student down? What do we do? That's literally the big question here. And it's going to come into 4 different parts. The first part being a prompt to student to switch the replacement behavior. And it's going to be, how do we redirect the student? How do we kind of reteach that skill in that moment? Now, the second part of this is describe how the staff could handle the behavior if it happens again. What are we supposed to do? Positive discussions with the student after the behavior ends. How do we bring this topic back up to the student? So like once it's all over, how do we have a discussion with the student about it? Let's talk about what went wrong, what went right, how we can move forward, and what are going to be any future classroom or school consequences if the behavior continues. These are all really important because it's going to help us follow through and not just kind of be stuck there and be like, I don't have a plan for if it happens again. We have a plan where it's not always the best plan, but it's a plan, and how we will start working through our plan. There is a checklist resource in this guide, of course, and a rubric to follow. And this is a very lengthy rubric, so feel free to go through it and see together what it looks like. Now we're going to look at the penultimate area, and this one is behavioral goals. So here in the template, the behavioral goals are going to actually start with a required section for your functionally equivalent replacement behavior, and that's your FERB, right? To do this, you are going to use a 9 format system to help break down each one of these areas. This is just a goal broken down into 9 areas. That's literally it. What to write in those 9 areas? Of course, it's in the guide. It's actually the second half of this guide here. So 9 format for a functionally equivalent replacement behavior. And it's just going to tell you what you should be writing, what you're answering in each question here. Then after this section, remember that's required, you have option 1, option 2, and they say the exact same thing. But option 1 and 2 is, or the option that you're looking at is, are you looking to increase the positive behavior or decrease a behavior? That's it. Are you looking to increase a behavior or decrease a behavior? That's going to lead you into writing, or stop a problem, sorry. That's going to lead you into writing the next part of the goal. And that actually does not have 9 sections. It has 6 sections. And we will follow the 6 format goal, or 6 format kind of guide here. Same thing as the 9, but it's looking at, what do we want to do? We want to increase, we want to decrease, and we want to stop. And if that's the case, like if in either of these cases, it is going to help us figure out how to write in these sections each. All right, included in this section is a blank monitoring goals worksheet area. And of course, a rubric down below. And the rubric is quite extensive here as well. When the text gets smaller, it's when we start to know it's really important. Know that there is an entire section in this guide on designing behavioral goals, on just goals. There is so much here on goals, on helping you write goals, on helping you understand goals, on putting in different ideas about goals, making sure you consider everything. And look at how many pages I'm scrolling through for them to help you just on goals. I'm going to keep going because there's also a ton of different examples of these. For a student who is task refusal, for a student who is off task, different age groups. Again, I'm scrolling here because what I was trying to get to is line 14. So there's like a good 10 to 15 pages there on just goals and support for goals. Please look through, have this as on hand for you if you ever need it. Okay, line 14, last piece of the puzzle is communication, manner of communication. How are we doing it? How often are we doing it? Who's involved? Honestly, pretty simple as it goes, but they also will break it down into these different areas. And then we'll, of course, teach you how to write the different areas. The most important one is, I think, the 2-way specification. And this is, how are you guys talking about it back and forth? Not just, I'm telling you this and we're done. No, I'm telling you this and I'm telling you this and we're talking back and forth. This is ensuring that communication is supposed to be happening on a 2-way street, not a 1-way road, right? That's literally what it's asking or telling you to do here. So here are some examples and a worksheet to help you, but it's the same thing. And finally, our scoring for the progress monitoring element before and communication down here on line 14. That is the guide in its most broken down pieces. And yes, it is a lot. However, writing behavior support plans is also a lot. doing functional behavior assessments is also a lot. None of this is an easy peasy kind of situation. It might come to be easier to you or more interesting to you. Time goes on when you have real case examples. However, it is a lot.